Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am here with Anika Jackson. How are you, Anika?
I'm pretty good. Thank you. It's so nice to be here, Angela.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So, as a Marcom executive and instructor at the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism and co-host of USC's MediaSCape podcast, Anika's knowledge of the intersections between public relations, branding, and digital media management is a perfect match to elevate results for brands. She serves on the advisory board for the UC Santa Barbara Women in Leadership Executive Program, is a member of Intuit's Small Business Council, and contributes her knowledge and thought leadership for the benefit of multiple local, national, and global organizations. Anika launched the Your Brand Amplified Business podcast in 2020, which has ranked in the top 0.5% of podcasts. That's amazing. That's really cool. That's so cool. So I love talks about branding because I feel like it is one of the most important things that we can do for our business. And I can become kind of a stickler about branding. So my employees are, they come up with ideas and I'm like, looks great, but can we just make it brand compliant? Like, can we just, I made this new marketing folder or flyer. Okay, great. Can we just make sure our brand colors are in there? Can we make sure?
Oh, yeah.
So we even had these like fun custom golf shirts bowling shirts made for an event that we attended. And I was so adamant that everything be brand compliant, like with colors and even I'm like, that lettering doesn't look quite right. Like it was, I probably did like 15 revisions, but
no.
I understand the value.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of having accent colors, secondary colors, all of that to add that little spice when you need to.
So I love that we're going to talk about branding and PR and marketing. I think all of those things are just so important, and we don't talk enough about them. So let's start. I just want to find out a little bit more about you. So what made you want to go into branding?
Oh, wow. I think like almost everything, I kind of fell into it.
Okay.
So I grew up in Kansas and there wasn't a lot to do. So when I was in high school, I would go dancing with my girlfriends and like go listen to music, drive to Kansas City for some excitement in our lives.
That's awesome.
At that point, a friend of mine said, oh, this DJ would like you to start promoting them. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I never realized that was a thing, right? And so I started promoting DJs in different events, and that way I got in free to the shows.
Ooh,
and that kind of just snowballed. I started a little zine. I had my own club nights. I started throwing parties. And that parlayed me to a move to Chicago to work for Kevin Berg and Associates Marketing and work on a lot of different accounts from Audi to Smirnoff and Camel when people still smoked in bars.
Wow. Yeah.
Aging myself a little bit. and then I moved to LA, worked for KBA out here, and then started working at a magazine publisher. And I was using really more in the experiential marketing space and learning as I went. Then I started working more with like programs for advertisers and putting together different packages and really thinking about brand and how you portray your brand, whether it's to advertisers or consumers, and create that sweet spot for both of them to connect. And I think that's what it really is my journey has always been about connection and helping people find collaboration points and bringing people together.
Yep.
And I didn't really even realize that was brand at the time. And, I have had a few other moves. I'm in LA for the third time now after San Francisco, LA, Houston, and back to LA. And what I realized is that I've collected people from every place I've lived, from all the different experiences and jobs I've had. And it's part of my personal brand. It's because I like to be intentional about those relationships, but it's also helped me get work. And I've also been able to see, even though I don't live in that city anymore, people remember who I am because of how I acted, how I showed up, and they'll hire me for that. And so it was really eye-opening to just I mean, that sounds really silly, but to realize that I could be hired on the merits of the work that people saw me do and not just having to be in the community or be in all of the publications or be at all of the events, which is a very Houston thing, by the way. So,
Yeah.
well, you're in the South, so
yes.
so
We love to connect in the South. It's all about,
yes,
those
yes,
interpersonal relationships that you
yeah,
have. And yeah, I mean, I could not agree with you more. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that's also probably where your podcast came from, is that just desire to connect
yeah.
and, wanting to share information and wanting to make sure everybody is kind of like, you're kind of sharing some really great insight with people. I love that. So yeah, but I am a big believer in building a personal brand, because your personal brand follows you everywhere you go. And so, whether I'm leading a company or a networking organization, like I want my brand to be not just my company, but who I am, my values, what I stand for, and that consistency is throughout everything I do. And
Oh
so
my
I tell my employees, I want to be so consistent in everything that I do that what my response is going to be before you ask the question.
this is like music to my ears. Because I think people forget that especially when you're starting a business,
Yeah.
your brand, your business brand is you,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And if there is a difference, we've seen it time and time again, whether it's in politics or in the business world, when brands say one thing and then the people behind the brand say something completely
Oh,
different,
yeah.
they
Yeah.
lose trust.
Yep. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's your words matching your actions. So I was just thinking the other day, what a brand nightmare this is, because with the whole Boeing thing, with everything that's happening with Boeing, you have the CEO talking about how safety is his number one priority, and all of these things, but none of the actions that he has had have been in alignment with that brand. And
Yeah.
so, what he's saying and what he's doing, what he's putting his money behind, what he's putting his, intentionality behind is not safety, it's shareholders. And so, not to go on a soapbox about Boeing, but it was just, to me, it was like, that's the epitome of losing trust. When you don't align with what your words and your actions don't align, you're going to lose trust all day long, because you no longer have a brand.
Right.
You're not compliant with what you're saying you're doing.
Well, I could totally go on a tangent about this because I think so many of the big companies, especially with AI now, right?
Yeah.
Seeing that there's been a lot in tech, in the world of tech and aerospace as well. There's a
Yeah.
lot of ask for forgiveness, right?
Yes.
Let's rush and get things done, and we're not going to care as much about privacy or safety or other issues,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
beholden to these other people, our shareholders, which usually the are majority shareholders in a lot of these cases.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing this time and time again, where you see people get fines or companies get fines, but then it doesn't really matter because they have so much money and
Mm.
market share that people are beholden, or companies still have to use them, and there's not a great alternative. And that's why I think people look to be more invested, especially when they're working with smaller brands, with small to medium-sized businesses, because they like, we may not be able to trust those bigger brands that we kind of, an Amazon, like, yes, I
Yeah.
order from Amazon often,
Right.
but some of the things that they do are not always great. But I know I want to be really intentional in my
Yeah.
actions, words, my deeds, show up with my values in everything I do. And I want to make sure people who work with me or partner with me see the same thing
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's in everything that we do, even parenting, even parenting. And I actually had this conversation with my son yesterday, because we were talking, he's 17 years old, and we were talking about something where, there was a child that was acting up a lot, and the mom kept threatening, "Oh, you'll lose your phone. Oh, you'll do this, whatever it is." And I'm like, "Okay, and when she did it again, did she lose her phone?" "Well, no." And I'm like, that's branding. Like that's, not being consistent. I was like, if you don't know what version you're going to get, and then all of a sudden you threaten 10 times, you don't lose your phone. And then all of a sudden they snap, they take the phone, everything goes crazy, everything burns down, and now the kid is thinking, well, they're really crazy. And it's like, had you just been consistent from the start? And so again, it goes back to consistency, and branding is all about consistency. It's all about, you should know what that brand's values are before you ever even have to ask. Like you should already know. They should just be that consistent.
Exactly. And totally going to share a story about my kid.
Yeah, please.
Daughter's 16, and we've always done volunteer work together, and
Oh,
we've
that's
always
awesome.
shown up in that way. And uh, something that happened this school year was
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of books we're in a public school district, but it's a very wealthy one
Uh-huh.
where they have a lot of books that they just get rid of. And she saw this happening in several departments. And she made it her mission to rescue the books because she's like, oh, well,
Oh.
my mom will know somewhere to donate those to. So 3 times this year, I've had to go to school and fill my car with books and figure out, okay, where are we going to donate these? Because textbooks, not every nonprofit will take them. Some
Sure,
we might want
yeah.
to send overseas. But because she knew that she loves reading, I love reading, and she also knows that this is something that's part of our nature and our heart is we don't
Mm,
want those books to be put in the dumpster. We want to make sure that they find a good home because there are a lot of people who don't have that access to those books that could
yeah,
use them. And so that to me, I was like, I must be doing something right because
that is
she sees,
awesome.
she's doing that and she sees that that's something that's important to me. So it's important to her.
Yes. And I love that she already expected that you would already know and that you would be on board. And that says so much about you and your relationship with her and what you've been able to convey and what your values are. So that's amazing. I love that story.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about branding with companies, and this is where it gets really tricky. Everybody wants to create a brand, but they're like, well, what does that mean? Is that just a logo? Like, tell me what a brand is.
Yeah. That's so many people think it's a logo. So many
Yeah,
people think
yeah.
it's colors. And yes, that's your brand identity. That's such a big part of it.
Mm,
But I try to be really intentional, whether it's a podcast or a business or whatever you're putting out into the world.
yeah.
Take the time to take a step back and think about why are we here? What is the purpose
Mm,
of this business, of this service? And most of us, it's because we saw a hole in the market.
yeah.
So that we're like, okay, we can't find this, so other people can't find this, or oh, we can do
Hmm.
this a little better or differently. So you need to be really clear on your purpose and then figure out what your vision is. What will the world look like
Hmm.
once you've enacted this purpose? And then the mission is the tangible day to day. Here are the tactics, and here's what we're going to do to put this vision to life.
Hmm.
And then purpose, values, all of those things. The brand blueprint is so important to build a strong foundation before you move on to the colors, before you move
Mm,
on to the fonts, before you move on to the accents. Because the other thing with color is that there are colors that reflect different things, but
hmm.
if the color green would be important for your business, but it's not a color that you love
Yeah.
and that you see yourself in, then don't use that color. Like find
Right.
another color that's similar, that has, the same messaging or two colors that you can put together. And so I think people usually think about that first, and they might think about colors that may or may not work with their brand, but you really have to
Mm,
go back and start with who are you? Why are you here? What are you bringing to the world? What will people get out of working with you or buying your product or service? And if you
yeah.
have that nailed, that everything else becomes so much easier. Your customer personas, how you're going to message to people, what social media platforms you should be on, who you're going to
Hmm.
speak to, what podcasts you want to be on, or what, publications you want to be interviewed in. All of that
Hmm.
just clears up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you start with the values of the business first. You start with values and why are you here and what are you doing before you get to the logo. Because it almost would make more sense to develop all of that and then communicate to the person that is designing the logo. This is what
Yeah.
we stand for because it will inspire them to come up with a logo that reflects that.
Yeah. Yeah. Nowadays it's so easy. People go on, and I do it too, right? We go on to
Uh-huh.
Canva, we go on to
Yeah.
different platforms, and we find some, oh, we like that and that and that. Okay, that looks good.
Yep.
But taking that step back, and it helps with the intentionality. It helps you find
Yeah.
that little extra zhuzh that you're going to put into the logo mark or to your
Hmm.
tagline that you
Hmm.
wouldn't find if you start with a logo. And it's the same thing with PR, with marketing in general, right? People have come to me and said, I'm ready for PR. Like, what's your brand? Well,
Yeah.
I have a website.
Right.
What does it say? Like, who are
Right.
you? What do you really want to bring into the world?
Hmm. So
Yeah.
there's a book that I love called Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And I actually give it to my team. And, it's a really big part of how we communicate about our business because, you know, I own a security and event staffing company, and we generally are not the cheapest, and in fact, we're never the cheapest. We're kind of a premium service, but the reason that we're able to go in and still get new clients is because we don't start with, the what we do. We talk about why we do it, and the why we do it and the values and the mission and all of those things are what make us a premium service. It's why, why would you want to do business with us versus our competitors? And it's the why, it's the why we do what we do.
And that's where people usually get things wrong. They want to put everything that they can offer somebody up front and center.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but how does it differentiate you? So starting with why and really being able to speak to that, I can completely understand why someone would walk in and feel so much more comfortable working with you than with 5 other companies that might offer similar services, but they don't start there.
Right. Yeah.
They're looking at it as a transaction instead of a relationship. You're building a relationship.
Right. And we're not just selling them on the idea of having security services. We're selling them on the idea of having a partner who cares about safety. And it's a totally different mindset. It's we're going to work together to create the safest, most hospitable environment. And, not just we're going to put a security guard on that door. Anyone can do that. And so, we really try to differentiate ourselves through our values and not just through our tasks. Anyone can do the tasks, but so when we talk about, you mentioned PR and people wanting to go into PR, when is the right time to go into PR as a small business?
Oh, I'm a big believer in what we call the peso model, which is celebrating 10th anniversary this year. So exciting, which is paid, earned, shared, and owned media. Okay. And even though it starts with paid, the first part is really the owned and then the earned. So the owned media is your website, your email list, what you put on your blogs. Shared media would be how you're sharing on social media, for instance, or how other people are helping share your message. Okay. Earned media, I know I'm going a little backwards. Earned media would be interviews, PR, publicity, but also it could be reviews that you get.
Okay.
Party websites, right? Yeah. Other people validating that you are who you say you are. And then paid is, of course, paid advertising, direct messaging. And so I always think they all need to be part of the mix. Yeah. If you start with owned and shared, of course, you want to make sure you have a great presence so that when you get earned media, people can find you, see that you really are this wonderful company that they've read about. And then you can turn that into paid advertisements too, especially if somebody else is saying something great about you. So for me, I don't think it's ever too early to start with PR, because I also think a lot of people who start businesses aren't necessarily comfortable talking about themselves. And so I want to get them out of, it's not really about you. It's really about what you're providing to the world.
Right. Absolutely.
So the why.
Yeah.
So if you take the ego part out, then it becomes a lot easier. But also people usually need a little time to warm up to speaking their message. Yes. And so I like to start with smaller publications, with smaller podcasts or local, events, maybe just speaking to a class of students so that you really get used to sharing. And then you see how people react. And then, and then you feel more confident and comfortable. And then you can go on bigger platforms. And so I always look at it as kind of like being a child. You learn to crawl and then you learn to walk and then you learn to run. And I look at PR as the same thing. So I was just talking to somebody earlier today and she said, well, when is a good time to start book publicity? When it's out? I said, no. You need to start way before. You need to make sure